Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Happy Labor Day. I hope everybody had an enjoyable and safe weekend. Before we get into today's upload, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time, guys. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter. I'm going to describe an event that took place a few days ago. In my city, there is a legend of a skinwalker-type creature that lives in the woods of the park. People call it all kinds of things, including Orange Eyes, Hopkins Monster, Sludge Walker. I prefer to call it the Sludge Walker. I heard about it from people a while ago, but never actually went looking for it myself. I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, and neither do my friends, so we never had a reason to believe. The other night, my friends and I decided to take a shortcut through the woods of the park, as it was raining a little bit. Should mention that it was about 2 a.m. at this point. As we're cutting through the woods, we hear something moving a little ways behind us. At first, we thought it was a deer, but when we noticed that it sounded like it was trying to walk quietly behind us, we realized it wasn't. Talking to my friends afterward, we all agreed that we thought it was some sort of homeless dude that was about to rob us. We all froze and looked back to see a pair of orangish eyes, standing about 8 feet off the ground, 15 feet behind us. I don't know why, but we all kind of stood there staring at it until one of my friends turned his phone flashlight and pointed at it. It didn't fully illuminate the creature, but it allowed us more or less to see the body. It had long, bent neck with long arms. It appeared to be either black or brown and about 8 feet tall. We looked at it for a couple of seconds in disbelief, and we all ran at the exact same time. I still can't believe what I saw, and I'm still shook up about it. Today's second encounter brings us to Wisconsin. I saw a humanoid or something in the woods outside my childhood home. It was rural northern Wisconsin, and I was about 14. Up until that day, I had zero fear of the woods. I spent most of my time out there exploring and fearing nothing. My parents had a bad marriage and fought a lot. I felt more home outside than in the house. On hot nights, I'd take a sleeping bag out onto the roof of an old shack on our property. I saw bears, I saw wolves. They were always more afraid of me than them. I didn't believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, demons, or even God. I only got lost out there once, when dark fell sooner than I expected. I stayed calm, found the North Star, and knew that if I continued south, I'd eventually come across the old railroad tracks near my house. Even though spending the night out there didn't bother me, the thought of my mom's rage when I got home did. So it was summer, and I had just turned 14. By this time, my mom and dad had split up. He worked all the time, and my sister was now living on her own. Once school was out, it was myself and my cat. This was before internet and social media and smartphones. We lived on a dead-end dirt road, and around noon I took my usual stroll down the long driveway to check the mail. My cat followed me everywhere, and I actually kind of relied on him to give me the heads up if there was a bear or something close by. My cat noticed a bit of movement behind us as I stood at the mailbox. It made me aware there was something across the road in the trees, but there were these pesky deer everywhere. I heard a loud crash as if something was making its way through the brush loudly. I simply tucked the mail under my arm and headed to the woods to investigate. My cat followed close behind. I got about 10 yards in when I noticed what I hadn't noticed before. There was no noise. Nothing. It was a beautiful June day, and there wasn't a single bird singing, no insects, no leaves rustling, just silence. At that same time, I registered the silence. I got the eerie feeling that something was watching me. I stopped immediately and started scanning the woods for deer. Hunters know what I'm talking about when I say you look for a shape of a deer instead of trying to pinpoint them by color. That's when I spotted it, 2 furry brown legs, the top of it concealed by tree branches. Then my cat hissed. I looked down and he was completely poofed up, and his back was arched, looking at the same thing I was. I looked back up and the legs moved, not like a deer, like a human. Everything happened at once after that. I dropped the mail, picked up my cat by the scruff, and ran for it. Whatever was out there was running after me. I never ran so fast in my life. I tore up the driveway into the house, locked the door, and grabbed the phone. I called my next-door neighbor, who was the ex-chief of police, and he came over immediately with his pistol. He checked out the spot I was in and found nothing. I was so hysterical I was in tears. He stayed with me until I was able to reach my mom and have her come get me. Of course, they thought I was completely high or delusional. I know exactly what I saw and felt. It was broad daylight. I never felt safe in those woods again and stopped sleeping outside. Please note, I should probably add that I thought I was looking at deer's forelegs, but once they took a step, I realized the legs were far too thick and human, but with fur for that. And there was only 2 legs, not 4. Plus, I realized it was too tall for a deer to be concealed by the tree branches. It all happened within seconds. I was and still am the calm, rational middle child, and my parents trusted me. They let me sleep outside sometimes. We all did, to catch the meteor shower. I'd casually mention running into a wild animal, and my dad would just casually say, "You made a lot of noise. Good." I was quiet and sensible, and had never freaked out about anything before then. I had my neighbor's number for emergencies, and had never called him prior to that. This is how shaken I was. I was embarrassed when he and my mom looked at me like a fool, and later when my dad also didn't believe me. Not once did my instincts set off in those woods until that very moment, when I absolutely, beyond a doubt, realized I was prey and ran for my life. Today's third encounter. So for a bit of backstory, I live in Colorado, and I'm a very outdoorsy type of person. My friend and I both have horses that we keep at the local ranch, and it backs up to hundreds of miles of forest, cottonwood trees. Most of them at least 50 feet in height. It's eerie as hell out there. So anyway, this one night there's a storm, and we get stuck waiting for the hail to pass under some thick brush. Woo, Colorado weather. But by that time it had passed, the sun was setting, and we were 4 hours from the ranch. We wanted to try to get back as fast as possible, and it got dark extremely fast. You couldn't see 6 feet in front of you. We ended up having to use our phones as flashlights that barely lit the ground. Familiar forest became completely alien, and we ended up taking the wrong trail back. It led us to this abandoned building, mostly fallen in on itself. And outside of it, we found heaps of deer bones, mostly ribs, but a few skulls as well. They were white as snow. Like you could almost see them perfectly without the flashlight. It was creepy enough, so we started leaving when we started hearing something in the brush around us. Now, we are no strangers to bears or mountain lions, but this sounded much different. It was a lot lighter. It moved with a creepy grace, almost like a deer, I guess. So we kept going, and the thing kept following us. Our horses were both spooked and acting irrational, very out of character for her Mustang and my quarter horse, who are both trusty horses. We do trails all the time and even sometimes at night, though we'd never been this deep or this lost in the woods. That's when this horrible, horrible smell hit us. I can only explain it as body or burning flesh. It was disgusting. I almost gagged. I thought a serial killer or something was about to jump out at us. At this point, we had both pulled our shirts over our face and were trying to get out of there ASAP. Though the thick underfoot made it difficult for our horses to walk safely, so we decided that the best option was to dismount them. Now walking on the ground, my friend was in front of me, but I heard her from behind me calling to me, from the direction of the abandoned building, which was still not far from us, probably 50 feet. Something hit my horse. She reared up and almost got loose, but I held on to her lead. About 5 minutes later, the smell came back, and the weirdest-looking coyotes I had ever seen just trotted across our path, staring at us, like it was unusually large, especially for that season. And its pelt was darker gray than most around. I don't know if that's what the smell was coming from, but it was just weird. When it looked at me, the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. Its eyes were almost human. We got back to the ranch after 4 hours of constant walking to try to get away from the forest as fast as possible. When we arrived, all the horses broke out in a deadbolt from the end of the pasture near the woods to the opposite side. Needless to say, we untacked very quickly and drove off. I don't know what we encountered, but whatever it was, it didn't want us there. Today's fourth encounter. I grew up in the swamps of southeastern Oklahoma, just below the Kachimi Mountains, in the same swath of swampland that spans all the way through Arkansas into Louisiana. The legend of Boggy Creek took place in the swampland. We had 160 acres of cow pasture that ended where the swamp pine forest began. One day after school, me and 2 of my friends were back there playing in the creek that ran along the tree line. We looked up and saw a herd of deer coming towards us along the tree line. They saw us in the creek, but kept coming. They ran past us once they got close, and we gave chase. 3 young boys kept up with a herd of deer long enough for them to cross the neighbor's fence into his pasture. This was my first inkling that something weird was going on. The deer slowed down but kept going along the tree line. My 2 friends crossed the barbed wire fence and gave chase. I was overweight, so I got stuck in the fence and was left behind. Once I got loose and crossed over, I looked up to see my friends far across the field still chasing the deer. It then occurred to me, why aren't those deer going into the forest? I hung out by the fence and my friends eventually gave up on the deer and began heading back my way. I was standing there looking around at things, waiting. I looked down the tree line again to see my friends progress and see a black shape leaning out of the trees between me and my friends. It was there for a few seconds, and then it leaned back into the trees. My adrenaline kicked off instantly. One of my friends was over 6 feet tall already at that age, and he had a black shirt on. So for an instant, I thought I was seeing him. Then I realized both of my friends were walking beside each other further down the tree line. In that second, it occurred to me how big the black shape was, and that it had been the reason deer would not flee into the forest. Could it have been a swamp tweaker? Sure. But whoever it was huge. Bigger than the small black bears that would pass through from time to time. It's always haunted me. A year or 2 later, I was walking that trail that circled our land. Our land had a huge hill in the center with a grove of burdock trees bunched together at the top. The trail went through the grove. As I walked through the grove and came around the bend, I came upon a dead cow beside the trail, with its back to me. Not out of the ordinary thing on a cattle farm, so I went out to scope it out, so I could let my father know what I found. There was blood on the grass, and blood pooled beside the cow's throat. The blood was still fresh, liquid. The cow's throat had been ripped out, like pulled apart. Again, my adrenaline kicked off immediately. I ran through all the scenarios of what could have caused this. No wildlife around that area could have done it, except maybe a cougar or a very large bobcat. But the cow's flesh didn't look eaten or cut by teeth or claws. It looked pulled apart, and it was fresh. Whatever had done it was still around, watching me. I could feel it watching me. I grew up fetching duck eggs out of snake ponds and camping by myself out in the woods. I don't have much fear of nature, but these 2 times tapped into my primal fear I've never felt again. That was the longest walk home of my life. Tonight's final terrifying encounter. I was taking engagement photos with my fiancé out in Big Bear, California. We were staying out in this cheap place near the forest called the Gold Mine Lodge, good for broke young couples. We were staying the weekend, and we had friends come along with us, staying in another cottage. First day was fun and exciting, lots of quality time with my fiancé. I listen to lots of creepypasta as I sleep, so I'm familiar with skinwalkers and other cryptids. Throughout the day, I would joke with my fiancé about skinwalkers and stuff. She's had experiences with supernatural stuff. Maybe I was a little mean with my jokes. Do I believe in skinwalkers? Possibly, to an extent. I think there are some things on this earth you shouldn't mess with. It's still a part of my personality to joke about things, though. The incident happened on the second night of our trip. Around 2 a.m, I woke up, which is typically normal for me, but I heard this weird howling noise. It sounded like no animal I had ever heard. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but I heard the howling again. My fiancée was also up, and she called out my name quietly. She said, "What was that? I'm scared." Then the dogs in our lodge, Gold Mine Lodge was pet friendly, all started going crazy and barking. I told my fiancé not to pay attention to it, and we hugged each other. The howling continued for another few minutes or so, then stopped, along with the dogs barking. We didn't sleep well that next morning. Strange enough, my fiancée was saying she heard her mother's voice calling her that night. I'm glad I told her not to pay any attention to it. It does no good to give a skinwalker attention or let it in. That I do know about skinwalkers. Wow. Well, I'm just going to start off with the last one. As we know, Big Bear, California is not a stranger to cryptids or strange events, so this one does not surprise me at all. Maybe the guy should start being a little nicer and not joke about things that he has no knowledge of, besides listening to creepypasta. Because the facts are the creatures that really exist are a lot more dangerous than some writer writes in his basement or his room at his mom's house at the age of 37. There's no, you don't joke about creatures like skinwalkers, Dogman, Sasquatch. They aren't a joke. And that one kind of irked me, how he made light of everything. The northern Wisconsin encounter is terrifying because you're a 14-year-old child home by yourself, and you go into the woods and see these furry bipedal legs that whatever is attached to them is too high and hidden to be seen. You made the smartest decision you could have on that one. I gotta agree with you there. And it's natural for parents not to believe what their kids say, unfortunately. The Colorado encounter is that's just plain terrifying. Yes, you've got your horses, you've got a friend with you, but you're pretty much stranded in the woods. And you come across this abandoned building in the middle of nowhere, and you're then stalked by something you have no idea what's stalking you. There's a terrible smell. Then you see a abnormally large creature that you mistake for a coyote, or possibly a coyote, but almost too big to be, and weird looking, and a wretched smell coming from it. It's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy, terrifying encounter. The Oklahoma one, that is smartest thing for you, my friend, is to stay the heck right out of those woods. I know they're on your family's property, but don't go back there unless you got a firearm with you and it's got some kick to it. Definitely not a 22 or a 380 or a 38. Go back there with something that's got some spunk. Or just don't go back there. That's, first of all, you've already admitted that you're a little overweight. You're not, I right now, and even though my legs are getting stronger, I would not venture out without being armed or making sure that I could run and feel comfortable running away from something fast enough to where I had that much assurance in my legs. So, if you do go back out there, just be careful. Like I said about the big bear incident, these things are not anything to mess with. Whether it be a Dogman, werewolf, skinwalker, Bigfoot, deer man, goat man, whatever. They're not pleasant. They're not a bear. They're not a wild animal. They're not a mountain lion. Bears and mountain lions, they will run from a human if spooked or a loud noise or whatever. But these things don't. If they want to get you, they will get you. If it's not right then and there, it's further on down the trail. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Tomorrow I'm going to have a guest on from Virginia who is a search and rescue personnel, and he's going to share his terrifying encounters with us too. So with that, guys, I want to thank you, wish you a happy Labor Day, please stay safe, and bid you farewell.